Hello, sports fans. I'm your host, Antoine Jackson, with my co-host,
Quinn Lowe,
from Between the Classes magazine, and we want to get right into it. First off, congratulations to Coach Taggart with his first victory. The Bulls are 1-0 in the American Athletic Conference, and they had a great showing, great exhibition.
The best thing I noticed I took from that game was the fact that the team never quit. Even when they started off the first drive with the fumble by Marcus Shaw, a lot of teams that have been struggling like them would have given it up. Right. But they showed the heart. The defense forced the 3-and-out, and then we saw what happened with McFarland with the block punt. It changed the momentum back over to the side of USF, and they just kind of rolled with it for the first half, which gave them the big point, the big lead.
Big cushion, yeah. And with USF, they were going against a nice coach with Tommy Tuberville. He has SEC ties, so it wasn't a cupcake game. Cincinnati, a physical program known for being physical. They have lost their quarterback, Munchie Norris, early in the season. But, in football, it's a game of injuries. It's in the game. And
speaking of injuries, USF lost their starting quarterback, Stephen Bench, as well as Marcus Shaw, even before the half. So it would have been easy for the Bulls to wrap it up after the second half, because I think, as we watched in the press box, a lot of the media was starting to think, okay, can they finish strong? The biggest thing with them was, did they peak too soon? Did they get too ahead of themselves, especially with not having the quarterback, the field general, right, and having perhaps the most dynamic running back in the American Athletic Conference in Marcus Shaw?
Yeah, they're going to need Marcus Shaw. Hopefully the injury wasn't too long or too lingering or what have you, but the backup, Mr. Pierre, he showed some resilience. The team never gave up. They always showed fight for all 4 quarters, which is something I haven't seen out of USF the previous games, but they definitely fought. They fought hard, and it looks like they're trying to find some leaders. With Luke
Sager.
Luke Sager, he was a force out there. Yeah. Seeing Ryan Giddens, a former standout, coming out of high school. And
not to cut you off, but the situation with Ryan Giddens, I didn't know how serious it was, because I just found out today that he had just lost his mom 2 days before the game. We've been hearing, even in the interviews, that he played well in spite of. He had a great game in spite of, and a lot of the media didn't know what that in spite of was. So to find out today that he had just lost his mom due to breast cancer, and for him to come out and play as hard as he did, be the motivating factor, and then in the interviews be so humble about it, that's what kind of shocked me, especially after finding out everything I knew, because the first thing he did was give honor to God. So that stood out, where this guy could have easily wrapped it up. My mom's gone. This is probably the strength of his family, his backbone. He could have kind of melded in, but he was the focal point, and I think that kind of speaks to how Willie Taggart is getting this team to rally around him, get on the bus, as his mantra is. Right. So I think the first win is usually the hardest win, and now that they've got it, I think they can kind of focus on tightening up some of the things that they haven't done so well, making sure that the turnovers aren't as high, right, and figuring out if Shaw and Bench are going to be able to be available, right, for them come UConn. I heard earlier today that the injuries aren't too serious, but they could be lingering. So just like Bobby Evell said, you're only one snap away. Yeah. That everybody on the team has to be prepared. Right. So I'm just looking at I had to be very impressed, like I've been saying, how they were able to fight through and just step up. Bobby Evell was the starting quarterback, lost his position, came in, and actually had a good game considering the circumstances.
Right. He looked pretty good. He looked well. He looked pretty nice out there. Made some nice throws, scrambling a little bit. Kept his eyes downfield, focusing. Got Andre Davis involved. There was a Chris Dunkley sighting. Haven't seen him since he left Florida. I don't know where that guy's been at. But the team, they showed some resilience. I just noticed how tough they were in the defense. The USF defense, they might give up yards here and there, but they hit. I'm telling you guys, these people are hitting out there. So Willie's definitely instilling defense first.
We're about to head to break, so be sure to come back as we talk some more USF sports and the rest of the sports that's in the Tampa Bay area.
Once again, it's Antoine Jackson here with my co-host
Quinn Lowe.
And we're back here to talk about some conference games this week. It's always a big game in college football, no matter what conference you may be in. So with that being said, Quentin, who do we have in the ACC this week?
The big game that I'm looking at this week is the BC versus Clemson game. And while it may not pit two top 25 teams, and the fact that Boston College is still trying to restructure itself as a ACC power, you always want to keep an eye on a team that has a Heisman Trophy candidate. And Taj Boyd has been at the top of that list, if not the very top of that list, since day one.
He's been a rock.
Yeah, that upset over Georgia kind of put them in position to be that top dog. And it's like, okay, as I've told people, you may not win the Heisman in September, October, but you sure can lose it. And this is an opportunity where if he doesn't do what he has to do on his side of the ball, if for somehow Boston College is able to fluster him a little bit, even if they win this game, if he doesn't have a star power type game, he could be knocked from that list. And it's unfortunate because I still believe he's going to always be one of the top 3 or 4 players in the league. You have him, you have Braxton Miller, you have Jameis Winston now, the young pup out of Florida State, and you also have Teddy Bridgewater from Miami Northwestern that has really taking the stage. And the only thing with him is the fact that Louisville is playing such a cupcake schedule. So that's why I think with Taj Boyd at this point, he's my favorite for the Heisman, especially looking at that Florida State game, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. If he can keep it going and just keep that pace of maybe 275 to 325 yards, 3 touchdowns, minimal turnovers, that's going to put them in a situation to still be, not only have him in position for the Heisman, but have Clemson in position for the national championship game.
Right, and with Boston College, they had Florida State on the ropes for a little bit. I mean, from what I heard the score was like 17-3. I heard Florida State was down before they came roaring back. So
yeah, Boston
College is not no cream puff. You know, they just beat someone. They threw up about 48 points on someone else last week. I can't really recall who it was, but basically with Boston College, now they're going into Death Valley in Clemson, and that's not an easy place to play at.
Right.
Clemson does have a vicious defensive line consistently. Jabo Sweeten's done a great job there, you know, taking over for an interim coach and pretty much made Clemson fans forget about Tommy Bowden.
Right, you know, and that was really hard to do.
Very hard.
But I think with any coach, whether you're known or unknown, winning cures all.
Every time.
So as we make this switch, who do you have as the big game in the Big 12?
The Big 12, we have the Red River rivalry. Now, this game is very interesting because both of these teams are not really, even though Oklahoma's 11, they're not scaring anybody at that number 11. Now, Bob Stoops has always been consistent powerhouse, so we don't want to sleep on him. But I think right now the interesting story might be Mac Brown fighting for his job. You know, Earl Campbell said it's time for him to go. You know, Texas faithful, they're looking around. I'm hearing names like Butch Davis. You know, the names are surfacing. So the Sharks are eating right now, and the blood is surfacing right now.
And it's interesting that you have boosters bold enough to be handing out shirts talking about they want Nick Saban. Right. I don't think he'll make that transition, even though he could be king in the Big 12. I just see too much for him going well for him in Alabama, and looking at Texas in this game, it's just one of those things where I don't just short of Oklahoma falling apart like they're known to do. I don't see Texas having enough firepower at quarterback, and that's David Ash has been very suspect the whole year. And going back to what I was saying earlier about quarterbacks in college football that have let down big programs, because you never would have thought that a program like Texas would struggle, but it goes back to that, and I'm gonna call it a rumor that they didn't want Johnny Manziel.
Wow.
They didn't recruit Jameis Winston. He called Texas. He said, "I want to come to your school," and they ignored him. Yeah. Robert Griffin, Andrew Luck, all these guys are from Texas, and for some reason, none of them were even seriously considering the Longhorns. And now look at it. That's the position that they need the most help with.
Yeah, let's be realistic. With that being just said, that's probably why the boosters want Coach Mack out of there, because there's no way that you don't have Winston, the number 1 overall quarterback in the country, come on a visit. He at least gets to do justice of a visit. You have Andrew Luck. You know, he didn't go there. And Manziel, like, it's to the point now that the boosters are screaming, how do these kids are supposed to be locked programmed to kids to Texas? Mac's not really doing that, so it's Coach Brown's not really doing that. So I think they might want some new blood with the Nick Saban calling. I heard they want to give Nick Saban every piece of penny in America to come over there to Texas. So it's kind of hard for him to turn it down. But I think if he did go to Texas, it'd be too much of a backlash from the people from Alabama because him leaving the Dolphins was one thing. You walk out on Alabama, the Crimson Tide, after 2, maybe 3 out of 4 chips, and you walk out on this one.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him to say no, but I still think he has the position, just short of him not wanting to be in Bear Bryant's shadow, whereas if he goes to Texas, there's no coach that will have had that success at that school. So if he brings them 2 championships, he got a statue in Alabama. They'll name him a city. Right. They could do anything. He will own the state of Texas. So, just going back to the game, I just think if Oklahoma can establish their running game and use the bulldozer, Blake Bell, to kind of be that pass, get him to pass a little better, I think they're going to run away with this game.
Hopefully not for Texas fans, but right now I would not put my money on Texas.
Right.
Honestly, I'm not betting on Texas. So, Oklahoma, they should win, possibly, but, the team may be fired up for their coach. They know this might be his last round. Coach might be tired. Players know their coach. Coaches know their players. They might know, hey, coach might be ready to chill out, relax. He has a championship. He's been eating pretty good in Texas. I know he's not missing any meals, so.
Right.
It might be time for him to go ahead and sit down for a little bit. So it might be Mac's last ride, definitely.
Yeah, now I'm about to jump into the Big Ten. Now, this is close to my heart because I'm Michigan boy bred.
Yeah.
Love to go Blue Michigan.
Yeah, he's down.
But this is a tough game as they head into Happy Valley. This is one thing that I've noticed since Brady Hoke has been named the coach the last couple of years. The team, while they're 18-0 at home, they've struggled on the road. And this game is a 5 o'clock start, so it's not a night game, but it's still heading into that dusk period. And I have to still question whether and I don't want to be biased, but I have to wonder if Michigan is ready. They had a good game against Minnesota. They kind of straightened up some things as far as not having the turnovers. Devin Gardner had been probably still is leading the nation in turnovers with 8 interceptions and 2 fumbles in 5 games. Luckily, he didn't have any this past game, but there's still some things that I've seen on that team that as a fan, I can't ride with them. I refuse to be that homer, that slappy fan that says, oh, they're going to go undefeated. No. And going into Happy Valley with Christian Hackenberg, that's a true freshman that has played well. And despite them losing to Indiana last week on the road, you tend to always play better with home cooking. Yeah. And having the fans in Happy Valley go through what they've been going through in the aftermath of the Jerry Sandusky scandal, them getting back some of their scholarships, them having some type of hope. This is their statement game. If they can beat Michigan, this gives them that statement game for this season, gives them some opportunity to have some recruits in that area, and maybe even nationally look at Penn State again and saying, oh, they're maybe 2 or 3 players away from contending for the Big Ten title once they get off of sanctions. The key to this game is forcing turnovers. Indiana had this ability to beat Penn State the way they did because it was 44 to 24, and it got ugly because of those turnovers. And most of those turnovers came on special teams. So if Michigan is able to turn them over without turning over themselves, they can eke out a victory. But if Devin has another one of those games where he has 1 or 2, God forbid, 3 turnovers, it's going to get ugly quick because there's too much talent on Penn State roster. Allen Robinson, the wide receiver, is one of the front runners for the Biletnikoff Award. He last week had, in the losing effort, had between 7 to 8 catches, maybe 150 yards receiving. And this is a team that has the firepower. So I don't want Michigan fans to be sending me hate mail. Don't get upset at me. I'm just trying to be a realist because that's the true sign of a fan, knowing when your team isn't as good as you hope them to be.
Well, the thing with Michigan, though, what I've noticed, Brady Hoke has, first of all, hats off to the guy. He's done way better than I think anybody anticipated. Coming from San Diego State, the Rich Rod mess that Rich Rodriguez had, Michigan fans were pretty much ready to pack it up. Brady Holt comes in 18-0 at the big house. That's big time.
Right.
That means you're not losing at home, period.
Yeah.
I don't care what's going on. So, with Devin Gardner, hopefully he can tighten up a couple things. I noticed he had the number 98. Why does he wear 98?
The number 98, what Michigan has done now is they have these things called legacy uniforms, where they honor former players from the past, great players from the 40s, the 50s, even beyond there. And Tom Harmon wore number 98, and he was Michigan's first Heisman winner.
Okay.
So, in honor of perhaps the first great legend for the University of Michigan, they decided to make him the next legacy, and they picked Devin because they felt that he kind of embodied that same type of mentality that Tom Harmon had as a player. And there's a couple other guys like Jeremy Gallen, who's from Apopka, Florida, down this way, and originally wore number 10 at Michigan, but now he has Desmond Howard's old number
Right.
21. You have a couple other guys on the roster, and this is the number that he will have until he graduates. A lot of people thought it was cool for the Notre Dame game and felt go back to the 12. And maybe it's the curse of the 98. Maybe it's too much pressure. Maybe it's too much hype on it, because since he's gotten that jersey, he's kind of taken that downturn, because they played well against Central, they played somewhat well against Notre Dame, but that's where the mistake started. And the game against Akron, he fell apart. The game against UConn, the whole team fell apart. So
still won though.
Well, yeah, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Just
whether it's 100-0 or 25-24, a win is a win.
Don't lose.
Because we can point back to the team in USF. I guarantee they would take a couple one-point wins instead of these blowout losses.
Naturally. But I like Devin Gardner. As far as him, and I just like the guy. I think he's got the confidence of a warrior. I'm not a diehard Michigan fan, but I think as far as athlete talent-wise, he's definitely an elite talent in my eyes. So. We'll see how we're gonna be watching Michigan. Make sure we keep our eyes on those guys, especially when they get ready to play Ohio State later on in the year.
Definitely.
Clock's already ticking for that, so we're waiting on that. So, what about the
I'm gonna let you talk about this LSU Florida game in Death Valley, because I know you. You might not. I know you're a Miami fan, but you have to keep an eye on Florida, on the Gators, because that's in your state. And that's a team that
gotta watch your enemies closely.
Right,
guys.
definitely. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, with Florida having this guy Murphy at quarterback, now the offense is a little bit more, I think, explosive. Maybe a couple more. You can't just really prepare for the 8 in the box, 9 in the box, or just run down your throat with Driscoll and Matt Jones.
Right.
Now you have to pretty much, this guy Murphy, he got a little wiggle to him. He might throw a couple sharp passes, getting the ball to Dunbar. Maybe getting the balls to the guy from Alabama. They call him the young Percy Harvin. I can't think of his name, but he's from Selma, Alabama. I know that much, and he's fast. So he's working on getting the ball to his athletes, and the Gators are like 4-1 right now, rolling. Right. A win like this guy could do numbers for his confidence. And in the SEC, a big win like this, Gator Nation is like You know how the Gators can be, but at the same time, we're going to Baton Rouge. So with LSU, they have a whole nother different mindset. They have the quarterback Beckham, who is, I like his arm. He gives you LSU a more of a threat at quarterback than I've seen in quite some time. As far as getting the ball to his receivers, they lost a close one to Georgia, but they came back. They had 59, exploded for 59 points against Mississippi State, even though that's Mississippi State, but. It still was an explosion.
And that's one thing, you can never discredit any team in the SEC. Right. Because at any moment, you might be able to look past a little bit Kentucky, because they're still, at this moment, they're still growing. But what Mark Stoops is building at that program could get you, and maybe 2 or 3 more years, they could be contending where Mississippi State is. So you never want to look past the team. And the fact that only reason why I give LSU this advantage is because it's a home game for them. Right. And being able to hold for, like I mentioned about Michigan, being 18-0, it's a lot easier playing at home, playing in that environment of Death Valley, Baton Rouge. It's a whole different ball game. And we really get to see if that young quarterback out of Florida can handle that hostile environment.
It's his first test.
So
it's his real test.
We'll be looking forward to checking that out and seeing if LSU defense can bounce back after being torched by Aaron Murray and the Georgia Bulldogs offense, because I went into that game thinking, okay, this is the perfect storm for LSU to win. And Georgia showed me that, okay, not so fast. This may be our year.
Yeah, Georgia showed some things. And I think the quarterback is Mettenberg, and I'm thinking about Beckham Jr. Beckham
the wide receiver.
Yeah, Beckham. But he's fast.
Oh, yeah.
LSU has talent all over the field, so, nasty defense. They got corners, DBU, defensive at University, so... we're going to see what's going on, but that's going to be an interesting game. So basically, get the crab legs out, get the shrimp cooking.
Right, that gumbo.
Get the gumbo out because it's going to happen. It's going down Saturday.
And the last game is we're about to cover is heading out west to Oregon versus Washington. Now, Oregon is that team that you want to believe in them, you want to buy into them, but it seems like every time they venture out in the big games, whether it's versus Auburn, whether it's versus some of the big powers, it's like,
slow it down.
The defenses are able to slow that fast pace down because, especially when they have to go up against the SEC team, because SEC defenders, whether it's the front seven or then those back corners, their speed. Because it's a difference in when you can have a defensive lineman, a defensive tackle running a 4.8, whereas most defensive tackles throughout the nation pushing that 5. So that spread option that they've been able to continue in spite of Chip Kelly moving on to the NFL may not always get it going, but I think in the Pac-12, because no one outside of maybe Stanford plays defense, they kind of get ahead of themselves. They get hyped up. They see Jeremy Masoli. They see some of these other guys. They see DeAnthony Thomas running like a jitterbug, and they think, okay, this is how it's going to be. And they put up, if I'm not mistaken, they put up another 50 spot last Saturday against Colorado.
57.
And it's just, okay, at some point, they're going to be tested. And and I really don't think it's going to be Washington, because I expected Washington, while they played Stanford tough,
they played physical, I
expected them to pull that game out because I like Keith Price. This is another one of those quarterbacks.
We lost by 3?
Yeah. Where if they can get it going, Stanky at us as the running back, they have some weapons, but I don't know if they have enough horses on defense to slow them boys down.
Oregon is so fast. It's to the point that DeAnthony Thomas then is like, I know the quarterback, but it's after that it's like, who are these guys and where do they keep finding these guys from every year?
Yeah, and it's a matter of, and they're not a team that you see in the top 5, even the top 10 of recruiting. They may be the back end of the top 25, but they find 1 or 2 guys that can fit into the offense and they buy into it. And just imagine if
was the quarterback a 2-star, 3-star, anything like that?
I think he was highly recruited.
Okay.
But they've had guys that, and I didn't realize how big he was. You would think, okay, he's fast. He might be 6'1", 6'2". This guy is 6'4". So he has the potential on the next level if he can tighten up that mechanics as far as throwing and getting his accuracy on that level for the NFL. So I was going into the season thinking he was a standard, dual threat quarterback that may not be as big, but he. So the thing with Oregon is if they can find, and like I said earlier, they'll find that test when they go up against Stanford. And even Washington may be able to score a little bit on their defense, but until you find a team that can force that duck offense and their 50 million uniforms to slow down, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, those uniforms get you hyped up, ready to play. So
right,
you put those uniforms on, you ready to play.
And that's the beauty of that field night Nike money. And I really wish I could afford to go out there and watch them. But it's one of those things that this while it may not be the true marquee matchups throughout college football this upcoming weekend, there's some good games that could determine how some teams play going forward. Right. You have Georgia with a game where they have to figure out, okay, where do they go with running back? They lost Keith Marshall for the season. Nice. Gurley's still hobbled, so it's like, okay, they were down against Tennessee to their freshman running backs, and while they were able to kind of group things together, it speaks to the fact that how much of a leader Aaron Murray is. Because I was having a conversation with someone. If you take a lot of the key players off of not just college football but NFL, they struggled. But they were able to still kind of fight through, and that was a tandem in Gurley and Marshall that they could start for every team across the nation, including Alabama. Those two.
Marshall took it towards ACL.
Yep.
Yeah, he took a nasty hit too.
And it was a lot worse than a lot of people thought, but it's never good having a guy with that much potential. Because he was seizing the opportunity with the injury to Gurley.
Put his name up for the stop.
Yeah, so it's
that's
just
why he was crying.
And that's why you have people that look like, oh, why are they schools recruiting 2 and 3 running backs a class? This is why.
You got to.
Because if I can get 2 5-stars like those two, why not take them? That's what Alabama does. You have T.J. Yeldon, you have Tenpenny, you have Drake, you have
the big dude.
yeah, you have 3 or 4 guys waiting in the line just in case this happens.
I mean that dude, that running back, that 6'3", I heard some people
Derek
say
Harvey.
They wanted to move to DN,
yeah,
so he can just get his money from the NFL and stop playing around.
Right, but he's so
play running back.
And that's the thing about it. He's so bent on being, and maybe he could turn into that Brandon Jacobs. Because remember, Brandon Jacobs, who started off at Auburn but transferred, because he was at Auburn with Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams. Transferred to Southern Illinois, 6'4", 240.
Running it.
And
beast.
And he recently re-signed with the Giants, but I guess Harvey is looking at that type of guy saying, I could be that running back.
See, when you're a big boy like that, they're going to bust your knees up.
Yeah.
They're going to hit your knees.
And especially with how the NFL is going with them teams and players starting to inch away from hitting up high.
They're going to go straight to his knees. They're not going to play any games with him.
So, yeah, it's one of those things where he has to
he's going to have to make a decision.
He's going to have to make that decision. And depending on how Alabama running back recruiting goes, because they're always going to bring in those type of. So, do you run the risk of sticking to this position and getting past, or deciding where I can go and get some play and look at my future? Because long as Nick Saban is there, you're going to have opportunity to go to the league.
Yeah, easily.
But as we begin to wrap up, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. This is a great show tonight, and I just want to thank my co-host Antoine for just keeping us busy talking about this college sport, because this is what we do. We love the game, we love the hype, we love the pageantry, and we just love the sports. And I'm once again Quinn Lowe,
Antoine Jackson,
and we're signing off for Between Classes Sports. See you next week.
Best show in the land.